If I can relate all the conversations I have with people every single day, the run of the bank started a while ago, probably a year ago. Anything from now on is going to be way too big to fail, but there's no alternative. Failure is the only option. That's why many people turn to gold and silver. Gold is
SD Bullion is at it again, but this time with a monster box full of Silver Tree of Life coins. Enter today at sdbullion.com/sweepstakes. What's going on in your shop right now with silver and gold? What are you seeing? What did you see today with buyers and sellers?
many more sellers.
Many more sellers.
But I did have a couple of sellers who were converting their silver to gold, which is always a good sign. Really? But then I have a customer who's going to send me a lot of gold to convert back to silver. So
is that a good sign?
It's all a good sign. It means people are awake and paying attention and not willing to take whatever they're told at face value.
Gold says we rise 1% in 2-week peak as Fed rate cut bets lift demand.
Yeah. The Fed has no reason to cut rates. Everybody thinks they're going to because it's a political year, and if you want to make your president look good, cut rates, even though he has nothing to do with it, because they can always raise the rates again after the election.
Here it says traders are currently pricing in about a 64% chance of a Fed rate cut in September. If they don't cut rates, and I'm not advocating that they cut them, but if they don't, they risk a financial crisis, especially in the banking sector. I showed you an interesting chart. The blue is the total assets of the banks that failed, and the maroon is the number of bank failures. So if you're looking back here in 2008, global recession and the Great Recession, global financial crisis, we saw a lot of bank failures, right? And then we put in a period of zero interest rate policy. ZIRP went on and on and on and on for years. But then last year, we saw 5. We had a total asset loss of $548 billion, okay? And then we had one more this year so far. Not a lot of assets.
And that's for how many banks?
One bank.
One bank. I mean,
this
that
year,
blue
so far,
line represents one bank.
We had one bank failure and about $6 billion in assets.
Okay. Anything from now on is going to be way too big to fail, but there's no alternative. Failure is the only option, unless they want to kill our debt overnight. Where's the money come from except the Fed? That's where it comes from. When J.P. Morgan wins the bet, they put the money in their pocket. When they lose the bet, they raid the capital reserves of Chase Manhattan Bank, or Chase. And then Chase Manhattan Bank calls up Jerome Powell and says, hey, Mr. Powell, our capital reserves are short by $5 billion. And he goes, hold on a second. You're all set. That's the way the system works. And Bernanke started all way back at the beginning of his term. He said, we can't let the commercial banks not maintain their capital reserves. It's free money. Free money.
So basically it works something like this. Monopoly. What if the bank runs out of money? Some players think the bank is bankrupt if it runs out of money. The bank never goes bankrupt. To continue playing, use slips of paper to keep track of each player's banking transactions until the bank has enough paper money to operate again. The banker may also issue new money on slips of ordinary paper.
Except that they don't issue it. The Federal Reserve issues that money.
The Federal Reserve does. You're absolutely right.
And that's a broken system. There's no way of rehabbing that system. It's a broken system from the start.
We could see this here happen again if they do not get the easy money that they need. That's the problem. We're going to see bank crises left and right, consolidations
but there's
left and right.
Unlimited supply of money. There's an unlimited supply of money. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it does. It's called inflation.
Well,
true inflation.
Yeah, but that's
M2, the money supply.
We don't care about
do
inflation, do we?
Yeah. We as stackers do. Oh, my word. We want more and more silver and gold to help protect us against that.
Inflation should alone get Trump elected. Inflation alone should get him elected. There are just too many people in this country who don't understand, especially when Biden gets on television. He says, well, I took office, inflation was 9%, and it was actually 1.4%. But he gets away with that. Why? CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, blah, blah, blah. He gets away with that. Mm-hmm. But, I don't think he's even aware of what he's saying. He just reads a teleprompter. So they could say, Mr. President, you have the best economy in the history of the world. And he go, and we have the best economy in the history of the world. That's the way it works. And there is an unlimited supply of money. It's, it's got your name on it, my name on it, but it's in the Fed. Unlimited supply of money. So that's why they want to make it digital, because they're tired of printing all this paper.
They want to make it easy, right?
Make it easy. Make it a computer entry. And, when it comes to digital currencies, I mean, if anybody out there gets into a discussion with a friend or some other Democrat who thinks that that's fine to have a digital currency, keep in mind there are 4.15 million people working for the federal government. My question is, how many of those people do you trust with your information? I don't hear any answers.
Nope, zero. I
Zero.
can answer that.
Zero is the answer.
Yes.
But all the transactions that would be done on a government computer, keep in mind, if you can't trust those people, don't stand for it. And now's the time to start objecting to it.
Mm-hmm. Said, inflation, hey, it's no big deal.
No, I am joking.
I know you're joking. But
that's the way our Congress operates.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the way most people think. It's no big deal until it hits the grocery store. I saw this article today. America's middle class is shrinking. The share of Americans living in middle class households dropped from 61% in 1971 to 51% last year. And during that time, here's the kicker. The share of Americans living in lower income households rose from 27 to 30%. And those individuals living in upper income households rose from 11 to 19%. So you're seeing a higher class and a lower class, and you're seeing that middle class shrinking. It's the engine that runs a nation. This is bad news.
Yes, it is. It is very bad news. Because once you get entrenched in that lower strata, it's almost impossible to get out. How are you going to get out? I mean, everything costs so much. How in the world are you going to get out? You can go on welfare benefits. Mm-hmm. That just increases inflation. Mm-hmm. You can, to run 2 or 3 jobs, and that'll kill you before you ever emerge from the lower class. Mm-hmm. It's a situation that actually feeds on itself, and there's no way out.
This right here is another reason why that we have a have and have not, growing have and have not populace in our country. And that is the growing money supply by the Fed, printing currency, I should say, like drunken sailors. It gets flooded into markets, and people who have money can then make money, and those who don't are looking for stimulus and more welfare from the government. It is destroying the middle class. They're basically saying to Congress, whatever you want to spend, we'll monetize it for you. We'll print it for you. Instead of saying, we're not going to do this. We're independent. We're not going to do it.
Okay, well, in Trump's last year, Jerome Powell went to see Nancy Pelosi and said, cut it off at $27 trillion because we can't pay the interest on the debt over $27 trillion. And she laughed at him. And now where are we? Under Biden, we're up around $35 trillion. There's a lot more to that, though.
Go ahead.
Probably the stress tests. That's a good example. In
Yes.
2023, around the May timeframe, they printed almost a year's supply of cash. Okay. In June, they distributed a lot of that cash to 4 key banks. Okay. Billions to 4 key banks. In July, they held a stress test. And in August, they went before the Senate to explain the results of the stress test. Now, what's a stress test? It's the ability of a bank to survive a run on the bank. And the fact is, if you decide you want your money out of a bank because you don't think your money is safe in the bank, you're going to go to the bank and demand that you close your account and you want your money. And the teller will say, okay, well, I'll get you a hit check right away. And you say, no, I don't want the bank's check. I want cash. Okay. Now, well, you have to come back on Thursday or Friday or next week or 2 weeks from now. All right, whatever it is. But that's a run on the bank. Okay. So they, Elizabeth Warren got this first person to talk in the Senate hearing, and she dumps all over Jerome Powell. That's her job. And then the moderator says, okay, now that we've gotten by that, let's take a look at the stress tests. And up on the Jumbotron comes the stress test. It was, if I remember correctly, Citigroup, Chase, Bank of America, and I don't know, the fourth one could have been Wells Fargo. But anyway, they showed their reserves in billions of dollars, and no problem. They can easily survive a run on the bank. So the stress tests were very important, and all the congressmen applauded and everything. So all the senators applauded. So, hey, we're on the right track. We got the right guy there. Banks have plenty of money to survive a run on the banks. Well, I mean, they wouldn't be having a stress test unless they were really concerned that there's going to be a run on the bank.
Exactly.
And if I can relate all the conversations I have with people every single day, the run on the bank started a while ago, probably a year ago, maybe
a
2 years
soft
ago.
run. A stealth run.
It's a run, nevertheless.
People that have been red-pilled and know where we're headed, they want to get their cash out of the public banking cabal.
Yeah, but the locations for that cash are limited. Okay, that's why many people turn to gold and silver. Gold is a safe place to put your money. The problem is, where is that safe place in your house? And it's not always clear that you should have $100,000 or more in your house in cash. But putting it into gold is a safe place to put it. And silver is rapidly becoming more of a barter currency. So having some gold and some silver. And, if you have a good bank and you feel comfortable with the bank, just don't overlook them too long. Don't not go into the bank every week. Because you'll get a feeling when you ask for more money as to how healthy the bank is or isn't.
What kind of third degree they put you through?
Yeah.
Yeah. It happens more and more.
And if you ask for blue $100 bills that you want to take out and spend on something like a new car or a new home improvement loan or whatever you take out, they may say, well, you'll have to come back next week. We have 20s and 50s if you like those. We have 1s and 10s too.
So I have a question about what you're seeing as it relates to that shrinking middle class.
Yep.
In your coin shop. You had mentioned something before we had actually gone live. What are you starting to see, Tim?
The worst thing is the population of immigrants that have moved into New Hampshire for a few reasons. I mean, all these guys that went into New York City and to Chicago and slept on the sidewalks throughout the wintertime. I mean, that's a bad deal. That's not really compassion. Sure, they could go into hotels, but the hotels filled up. Sure, they got new shoes and some extra clothes and sweaters and stuff, but that's no way to survive the winter. There are no jobs for these people. I don't care if it's 1 million or 5 million, 9 million, 15 million, whatever it is, there are no jobs. Keep in mind, I don't think it was the UAW that estimated this, but I saw an estimate that 500,000 auto workers are going to lose their jobs because there's no way they can work on electric cars. Electric cars are modular. So they will be hitting the job market at some point. And then, if the bank that I just left is any indication, there would probably be 200 or 300 bankers hitting the job market pretty soon. And then you add to that 10 or 12 million people who've walked across our southern border who are going to take all the low-paying jobs. Well, they can, but then what do? Steal, rob, other forces of crime, sell drugs. There are very few ways for these people to survive.
How are you seeing that literally reflected in your shop?
Every day, somebody comes in who can't speak English, who has something in his hand that he thinks might have some value to sell. And it's disheartening, but this is New Hampshire, for crying out loud. I'm getting more used to trying to speak Spanish with what I have coming in the store. And, I have to feel sorry for these people.
I do too.
This one guy, and the guy said to me today, well, you had me fill out one of those forms. How come you don't? I said, he's already filled out 2 or 3, and I don't think he knows how to write in English either. You're talking pennies or a quarter he found on the street that is different from the last quarter he saw, so it must be something that has value.
What do you do when you question whether or not it's stolen?
Well,
what can you do?
There's nothing you can do about a coin because nobody can prove that a certain coin belongs to them.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. You had mentioned that last time I was in your shop. Something very interesting about that. Was that a legal case?
It was a legal case. I think it originated in New York City. The coin shop that was being sued probably thought it could have been part of a robbery. But, they're saying, well, the person we bought this from says, no, it's perfectly legitimate. I've had those coins. It was dark junk silver, basically.
Right.
Had this junk silver for years. So when the city wanted to shut them down because they were accepting stolen property, they had to go to court. And the decision from the court was, there's no way you can say a certain coin belongs to you. How do you? Because it's a coin with a date. That's the only distinguishing characteristic of a coin is the date. So how can you say, well, that 1944 quarter is mine? Okay. It got tied up in the New York courts. I think it went to the New York Supreme Court. I think this is back in the mid-'80s. And when New York wanted to take it up to the Supreme Court, they just refused to hear it. Said, there's been nothing done wrong here. How can you say a certain coin is yours?
Yeah, you were telling me about the defense. How did that go down?
Yeah, well, that's what I heard. I don't know if that's
Tell me
true.
This is what you heard.
And I heard that from another coin dealer.
What was it?
I guess the defense attorney had an expert witness who knew all about coins. He worked for the U.S. Mint or something like that. And so he first searches around. He says to the prosecutor, do you have a quarter I can borrow for a second? So the prosecutor hands him a quarter. Yeah. So he hands a quarter to the witness. He says, okay, what are all the identifying characteristics of that coin? And so they say, basically, the date. That's the only one. Unless, let's say your name is Xavier, and every coin that you ever went through your hands, you marked with a big X. Then you might have a case. If somebody stole your quarter that you had initial, then you might have a case. But there is no other identifying characteristic except the date. And so the defense lawyer at some point says, okay, you're a witness, and it's time, the prosecutor's time. So he puts the quarter in his pocket, and then the prosecutor gets up, and he's not really sure how to start. And the defense attorney says, Your Honor, excuse me a sec. And he pulls a handful of quarters out of his pocket and says to the prosecutor, which one is yours? Now, I heard that happened in the case in New York. I don't think any judge will allow that to happen. He'd probably say, both of you approach the bench.
It's a great story, though.
It's a good story.
It is.